Perfect. Welcome. Good evening, everyone. We are here to discuss special topics in managing big data. Today, we're going to focus and continue our discussion that some of the students already started with the teachbacks. We're going to be talking and exploring more around data monetization. Data monetization is an extremely interesting and should be a very interesting topic for new students studying big data, because it's all about making money. That's what we mean when we say monetization. We mean creating value, right? Creating value, and then of course putting a price tag. Since we are talking about abstract structures, it's not easy always to figure out what the value is of what you're trying to sell. Some of the students discussed different types of data that you can sell, or different types of constructs. So first and foremost, you have to, or a company, when I say you, I'm using you as interchangeable with an organization that perhaps will, think about how to monetize data, and may actually, not really understand exactly how to do it. I think everybody loves the idea of making money, but a lot of companies do not really understand how to do it, and if they do, they may be operating at a suboptimal level. And you'll see why, because there's a lot of nuances to these opportunities. So first and foremost, we have talked about, and some of the students talked about, using data as a service, or we call it syndicating data, right? You can use data, you can sell data as a service. You can also sell insights from that data, what I would call transform data, and sell that or monetize based on that. And then you can also finally sell data that is applied, which I would also term as analytics enabled or analytics platform enabled, and sell it as a service. So the value propositions are very different, right? And you can see on this chart that the revenue potential typically tends to be higher when there's more value added. And that's why Chenzu earlier mentioned that, as a summary of the article that he read, that you all read, that, selling data, and what he meant is selling data raw, right? Which is actually even to the left of this enriched data or syndication data on this chart. And, as you can imagine, that's hard to sell, because companies or buyers won't understand what the value proposition is. So the value proposition actually becomes clearer as you go to the right of the graph, and therefore revenue potential increases. Hopefully that makes sense. If we look at different options and blow that concept out a little bit further, we are trying to create business value and sell business value, just like any product or service. The higher the value, the higher our ability to sell and capture market share. One of the best ways the companies and organizations wrestle with data monetization is they first start to use this data and analytics internally. They provide employees with reports, they provide business users with self-service options, etc. And then they migrate to emailing these reports, or providing it as a service to their clients, perhaps, and maybe genericizing it. Finally, they can embed some of these analytics in customer applications, and then sell those applications to their users. For example, when you buy a website feature from a company, a consulting company, they may be able to add certain analytics about your customers, about your site visits, about so many different things, and embed it as the web service. Okay. Next, from there, once the maturity level increases even more for the data and efficacy is established, companies can enrich their products and offer some advanced analytics, perhaps benchmarking, perhaps personalized alert features, perhaps modeling features, right? And then finally, selling data and analytical products, right, by themselves, packaging them, sort of creating distributed entities on these platforms that are pre-packaged, right? So throughout this curve, if you will, the maturity level grows for organizations to be able to do that, and therefore business value grows, right? So obviously, everybody would want to be on the right side of this chart because you make more money and your value proposition is really clear, right? But it doesn't start that way. You can't, you have to walk, run, and then jump, right, so to speak. Now, let's just take a simple example, right? Here's a simple data monetization example. Everybody's heard of the Internet of Things, right? The IoT. There are devices that we wear, the Apple Watch, the iPhone that we carry around, the Android phone, whatever. My thermostats are all in my house enabled by the internet, and I can access and keep track of the temperature swings in my house by room, for example. So an IoT wearable device for babies, for example, can collect temperature, sleeping patterns, sleeping orientation, breathing data, right? And you can start to monitor whether your baby is getting sick. So for example, that is the device that captures the data. Then what? We haven't really monetized anything, right? So if we look at the first case study, we can say, the wearable device that the manufacturer has provided identifies anomalies and sells this data to, let's say, a nearby drugstore, right? With, of course, the permission of the parents and, you know, the families that are holding on to this device. By the way, when you buy devices like this, guys, you're already, most of the time, implicitly giving approval or the go-ahead for your data to be shared, okay? So it's very difficult for you to buy these devices and say, I want to keep the data private. The whole reason they're selling you these devices at fairly cheap cost is because they cannot monetize the data that they're collecting from it, right? So you have to be very careful. If you're not okay with that, make sure you read the fine print. So if a user in this case has opted in, the drugstore sends a personalized message to the user and in the app, and offers to deliver medicines or provide dispatch a doctor or whatever. Use case 2, the wearable device manufacturer aggregates this device and sells the insights to retail clothing stores. Perhaps they don't necessarily sell individual, but they can aggregate that and hide the baby's name or the family's name, and that even that data is worth something, a lot, perhaps, to retailers, right? So these are very simple ways that companies, as you know, most likely, are starting to monetize data. If we look at if we take a step back and we look at the data economy, right, there's a framework that IBM came up with, and I thought this was pretty interesting. That's why I've been sharing it in this class. So you have first the presenters of data, then you have insight providers, you have platform owners, you have aggregators and custodians of data, and you have data producers, right? So there are, and then of course there are enablers like the network, cloud applications, and so on. But you can see that you can play, a technology vendor can play in at least one of these 5 areas, if not more than one, right? So you can be a presenter of data and still make money. You don't even have to own the data. You can actually just present data, purchase or acquire data from somewhere else, even for free or paid, and then present it in a novel way and collect money, basically. You can provide insights. You can do statistical and computational stuff on the data that's not already done. You can provide machine learning overlays, right? And then that will provide insights. You can sell those insights. You can also sell the platform, right? You can sell development environment. For example, Tableau, Salesforce.com. These are platform owners. They don't provide the data per se, but they provide the platform, the APIs, and things like that to connect. Data aggregators and so on, and data producers. So, IBM did a fantastic job of laying this out on one table to show us where data monetization players can play. And you can see that almost every high-tech company is engaged right now in one or more of these boxes, whether they know it or not, right? So tremendous amount of opportunity, tremendous amount of potential, right? To make money and also to provide competitive edges, right? So if we look at the world of data in a different way, look at Internet of Things, for example, you can create apps, or vendors can create, and companies can create value propositions that focus on two different dimensions, or one of these two different dimensions, right? One would be trying to create cost containment applications of data, and the other would be trying to increase the value. So I like to look at it as cost cutting on the left side and value generation or revenue generating on the right side. So you can create data monetization opportunities by focusing on generally one of these two areas. For example, to make money, a company might sell pay-per-use as a service pricing and to collect money for data. But if they want to focus on reducing costs, they might create data sets or data insights that focus on workforce productivity. So if I was an IBM or I was a company and I want to make, I think that my work, you know, I have opportunities to improve productivity, thereby saving costs, and by hiring less workers, I can perhaps buy some insights from somebody who has a good package to sell to me, right? To increase potentially new automation, to provide visibility, to provide early identification or anomalies, and so on. So, you know, I challenge you later on the reinforcement to start to think about ideas of data monetization in one or the other. Okay, where would you think there's more opportunity if you came up with an idea, right? And these are some of the slides to sort of, inspire your thinking. Here's some ideas again here, right? So this is some common types of data that can be used, right? So for example, location-based data, machinery data, living data, data from events, motion data, right? From cars and airplanes and things like that, and so on, right? So you've got a lot of different ways that you can collect and monetize data, or companies can collect and monetize data. Here's some examples written out, right? For instance, living data collected from sensors that monitor vitals, right? Like our blood pressure, heart rate, so on. Pharmaceutical companies can, who are looking to improve sales, can purchase this anonymized health data generated by sensors to find new customers and target their product marketing, right? And so on. So this is just, I thought was a very nice depiction of where companies can focus and where they're in fact are focusing. And once you start to think about this as students in this class, you can start to see ideas of your own if you're thinking about it, and that's the power of it. If we look at this slide for a second, you can see that big data has increasing variety and complexity, right? It starts from your ERP systems, right, with purchase detail, record level detail, going to your CRM, going to web-based interfaces for more advanced use of data. And then big data is everything like the IoT devices, the sensor devices, the stuff that really just proliferates the data volume, right? And you can see that as you go to far right and up, the value goes up, but the volume goes up, and you need more sophisticated data tools to be able to analyze this data. But there's a lot to be monetized anywhere on this chart. You could even start on the bottom lower corner and work your way up if you're a company and start to merge data from different aspects. I mean, there are companies making a killing on big data monetization, essentially, in novel ways and more interesting ways as the technology gets more and more sophisticated. Almost 5 billion in the next few years. So you can see that in this slide, North America still leads the pack in terms of opportunities of data monetization. Largest market share, 30% in the year 2018. And 34 or a little less than 35% of the total data monetization market is occupied by customer data. So we're very customer centric, and we want to sell more to customers, understand our customers better, as you know, and a lot of the data analytics are focused around customer segmentation and so on and so forth. So it's not surprising that over a third of the data monetization projects focus on customer data, and then companies are able to sell that, and the value proposition is really easy to sell. So that's kind of a little bit more color on data monetization. Hopefully this makes sense to you. You can start to see and get excited about some of the things that can be done with your help out there in the industry when you go out to the working